Welcome to Pieces Here. I'm Avis Kalfsbeek, and we're taking a little rest between podcast series to help Kitty O'Compost improve her reporter voice for peace. Kitty is a character I made up who's a little offbeat, a satiric smarty pants, and she's getting ready to report on a big story about peace, AI, and the future of the commons. It's called CTRL-AI-DISARM. At the end, you'll also hear the Next Peacelands, a roll call of global armed conflicts and arms exports. If that's too much today, it's okay to end early. But if you can stay, I hope you'll let it deepen your resolve for peace. As usual, you can find the words and books I make for peace at aviskalfsbeek.com. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from Thomas Wolfe, a writer who never used one word when 50 would do. But Lord love him, he could make a whole town rise up off the page. He wrote with a kind of emotional thunder, always reaching for the big, bright feeling behind a moment, even if the moment was small enough to fit in your pocket. This little passage about leprechauns is Wolfe at his most playful, a rare slip of whimsy from a man who usually wrote like he had the American landscape tied to his typewriter. We'll read just a bit of it today, enough to feel that curious shimmer he sometimes let peek through. Well, sweetheart, truth be told, I could read you Shakespeare or the town council agenda, and it would still count as a little peace break, because what matters is that we're here together, slowing down on purpose, and nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from On Leprechauns by Thomas Wolfe. An Armenian friend of ours, a Mr. Vladimir Adzigian of South Brooklyn, has mentioned among the defects of our literary style a certain coldness and economy of tone and manner, which, while it makes for precision and temperance, is likely to err too much on the side of understatement. This critic feels, and rightly too, we think, that our work would profit if it had a little more exuberance, a more impulsive warmth, even a little exaggeration here and there. For, says he, exaggeration is in itself a form of enthusiasm, and enthusiasm, in my opinion, is the quality that your work together with almost all American writing lacks. This cultivated gentleman then goes on to say that here in America we have never overcome the repressive influences of our Puritan ancestry, and he thinks we will never completely realize ourselves until we do. While admitting the truth of our friend's observations and conceding regretfully that our own style does suffer from a kind of puritanical spareness and almost frigid restraint, we think we might interpose a few mild, although apologetic, reservations to the general tenor of his remarks. In the first place, if our style does suffer from a puritanic frigidity, it is because we, in our own person, suffer from the same defect, and however much we may regret it, however much we may want to burst through the barriers of our reserve to a warm and free communication with the universe, it is probably better to reflect the color of our soul, even though that color be cold and hard, than to assume a false, unwarranted spontaneity that we do not have. Moreover, even if we could overcome the constrained reserve of our nature and break through to a more impulsive spontaneity, we should hesitate to attempt it because we have so many friends and readers whose own sense of propriety and personal modesty would be affronted if we did. Chief among these people are our Irish friends, whom we number by the hundreds. Our admiration and affection for the Irish is, we believe, well known. In addition to the traditional affection for the race in which every American boy is brought up and which is as natural to him as a sore toe, we have had the privilege time and again in our written works of expressing as soberly and temperately as any man could, as it seemed to us, and certainly far too soberly and temperately to suit the taste of Mr. Adzikian, what seem to us to be the shining and distinguishing qualities of the race, its great and lasting contributions to our nation's life. We have found frequent occasion to pay tribute to their sterling honesty, the devotion of their public service, the brilliant skill in politics and government, which have given them a record of unselfish and incorruptible administration that is, we believe, unequaled by any other people in the world. Where else in the world may a people be found who will so cheerfully and uncomplainingly take over the onerous and thankless burden of running the government, and whose devotion to the principles of law and order, sobriety, reasonable conciliation, and selfish and in seeking consecration to the common weal are as high, loyal, and untarnished in their idealism as are those of the Irish? Where else among all the peoples who make up the vast polyglot of American life will another people be found whose patriotism is not only 100% American, but maintains a constant average of 137%? We have considered it not only a duty but an agreeable privilege to refer to these well-known facts on several occasions, and if we finally desisted, it was largely because of the quiet protest of our Irish friends themselves. For, said they, the only reward they ever desired or hoped for was the knowledge of public duty modesty done and honorably completed. Virtue was its own exceeding great regard. There were, it was true, among other peoples, certain odious demagogues who were always making public speeches in their own behalf and slapping themselves proudly on their own breasts. There were even those contemptible characters who regarded politics as a means of feathering their own nests out of the common funds. As for themselves, however, all they asked was the joyful privilege of serving their state or their city as well as they could, given to the country the last full measure of devotion. That was reward enough, and the knowledge that one had given his all for his country should be sufficient for any man. Certainly the thought of public acknowledgement for such a noble and idealistic service was odious, and would we please not affront their deepest and most sacred feelings by speaking of it further? Since the matter was presented to us in this way by many of our dear Irish friends, we consented reluctantly to refrain from a further public display of our enthusiasm, rather than incur the quiet reproaches of a people who, as is well known, are among the shyest and most modest races in the world. In matters of literary judgment, however, we trust we may be allowed for a full and free expression of our emotions, since every race, no matter how innately modest, how consecrated to a public trust, may be justly proud of its artistic achievements and justly boastful of all its men of genius. We take it as a matter of general consent that Ireland has always swarmed with geniuses. Old Erin has been for centuries running over with them, has in fact had so many of this glorious type that it has been necessary to establish a kind of emigration service for the exportation of Irish geniuses to other nations which, though bigger, are lamentably deficient in their genius supply. The leading customer for the importation of Irish geniuses has been our own fair land. In fact, we do not believe it any extravagant exaggeration to say that where genius is concerned, the Irish brand tops the list with us. Here in America, we'd rather have one good, bona fide Irish genius than half a dozen Polish, Swedish, Czechoslovakian, or Hungarian specimens, no matter what the reputations. It is true that visiting Englishmen are still in considerable demand and ply a thriving trade before the culture clubs and female forums of the Corn Belt. Almost any ninth-rate scribbler of Great Britain can still come over here and insult the country with the choicest and most indecipherable sneers in his whole Oxford vocabulary, and command prices from his adoring audiences that no American can dream of asking. Yes, there is still a good market for the English genius, but among the haut ton, so to say, the true sophisticates of culture, the Irish bards and storytellers come first. A bad English writer may still put in a profitable 6 or 8 months and eat and drink his way across the pampas from Portland, Maine to Tacoma, Washington at the expense of this great, benevolent, and culture-loving people. But to do so requires considerable traveling, and the English genius cannot always pick his spots. He must occasionally prepare himself for the uncomfortable exigencies of one-night stands and bad accommodations and poor food. As an Irish genius is faced with none of these embarrassing possibilities, he can pick his spots and do as he damn pleases. He can remain in New York in the perfume salons of the art-loving plutocracy and can always have the very best of everything at no cost to himself, provided he exercises only a very small degree of caution and has sense enough to know upon which side his cake is caviared. An Englishman may have to stand an occasional round of drinks or stay with the second-best family in Hamtramck, Michigan, but a visiting Irishman never. A visiting Englishman may have to have at least the vestige of a reputation to have received the endorsement of Hugh Walpole, or to have in his pocket a letter of introduction from J.B. Priestley, but a visiting Irishman needs nothing. It is naturally preferable if someone has heard of him before, but it is by no means essential. The main thing is that he be a visiting Irish writer, and of course all visiting Irish writers are geniuses, and not only geniuses, but the most extra special, A1, 18-carat geniuses in existence. After that, no introduction is necessary. He can just call himself Sean O'Mulligan or Seamus O'Toole or some other whimsical appellative of his nature, and everything will be all right. Thank you for letting me practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead, CTRL-AI-DISARM. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Podcasts usually have ads you fast forward through. This one doesn't. Instead, I invite you to pause here just for a few minutes and listen with an open heart, not to memorize the numbers, not to analyze the politics. As I read each conflict, I'll say aloud, "Peace is here." You're welcome to say it with me or just think it quietly. If you'd like to read, sing, or paint your own version of the Next Peacelands, or tell me how to say peace is here in your language, I'd love to hear it. This is the Next Peacelands. Not for doom and gloom, not for pity or sadness, we speak and we listen to these geographic locations of wars and the numbers of deaths of human souls to help put the great disarmament, the period in which we live now, and peace at the forefront of our daily consciousness and actions. Following are the major and minor armed conflicts, over 1,000 deaths in 1 year as of November 2025. Myanmar conflict since 1948, 199,000 total fatalities, 13,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Arab-Israeli conflict since 1948, 263,000 total fatalities, 25,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Congolese conflicts since 1996, 211,000 cumulative fatalities, 10,000 deaths year to date 2025. Peace is here. Islamist insurgencies in Maghreb Sahel since 2002, 464,000 total fatalities, 18,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Mexican drug war since 2006, 417,000 total fatalities, 11,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Sudanese conflicts since 2008, 1,400,000 cumulative fatalities, 20,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Russo-Ukrainian War, since 2014, 400,000 cumulative fatalities, 66,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Ethiopian civil conflict, since 2018, 610,000 cumulative fatalities, 5,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Colombian-Venezuelan conflicts, since 1964, 458,000 cumulative fatalities, 2,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Afghan conflict, since 1978, 2,800,000 cumulative fatalities, 3,000 deaths 2025 year to date. Peace is here. Somali civil war, current phase, since 1991, 1 million cumulative fatalities, 10,000 deaths 2025 year to date. Peace is here. Civil conflicts in Nigeria since 1998, 104,000 cumulative fatalities, 3,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. The Yemeni civil war crisis since 2011, 382,000 cumulative fatalities, 3,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Syrian conflict spillovers since 2011, 656,000 cumulative fatalities, 9,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Cameroonian conflicts since 2012, 9,000 cumulative fatalities, 900 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Ecuadorian drug war since 2018, 9,000 cumulative fatalities, 4,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Haitian crisis since 2018, 20,000 cumulative fatalities, 3,000 deaths year to date. Peace is here. Does that mean the countries that weren't mentioned are more peaceful? Some are not. Here are the world's largest weapons exporters according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's Arms Transfers Database. These numbers use TIV, a value that reflects how much destructive military weaponry a country sends abroad, regardless of the payment or cost. The United States exports $729 billion in weapons volume, 43% of total global exports. Peace is here. France exports $136 billion in weapons volume, 10% of global exports. Peace is here. Russia exports $155 billion in weapons volume, 8% of global exports. Peace is here. China exports $61 billion in weapons volume, 6% of global exports. Peace is here. Germany exports $90 billion in weapons volume, 6% of global exports. Peace is here. Italy exports $37 billion in weapons volume, 5% of global exports. Peace is here. The United Kingdom exports $144 billion in weapons volume, 4% of global exports. Peace is here.